years old, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes love doesn't end in one big fight. It ends in quiet, invisible moments when respect starts to disappear. I used to think I was lucky to have Evan. He had that kind of restless energy that drew people in. He could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they'd known him forever. I met him at a tiny coffee shop near my office. He was joking with the barista, talking too loud, spilling sugar everywhere, and yet somehow he made it charming. I laughed even when I shouldn't have. That was Evan chaos that felt like sunlight. For the first 2 years, things were easy. He'd show up at my office with flowers, we'd take long weekend trips, and he'd talk about how he'd never met anyone who made him want to slow down. He said I was his calm. I believed him. When he proposed, I cried so hard I couldn't even say yes right away. We moved into a small apartment outside the city, a place with creaky floors and too many windows. I thought it was perfect. I worked in marketing. He was freelancing in design, so his schedule was unpredictable. I didn't mind covering most of the bills. I liked taking care of him. I thought that's what love meant, showing up when the other person's world was still trying to find shape. But around the time he turned 28, something shifted. It started with small things. He'd say, "You never want to go out anymore," or "You've gotten so serious, Lena." He began spending more nights with his new friends, people he'd met through a local art studio. They were younger, louder, always chasing the next thrill. At first, I tried to keep up. I planned surprise dates, weekend hikes, even bought tickets to a music festival just to remind him that I wasn't boring. He smiled, said, "You're trying too hard." That one hurt more than he realized. Then came the nights he wouldn't come home until 3 in the morning. Lost track of time, he'd mumble, smelling like beer and someone else's perfume. I told myself not to overthink. I told myself this was just a phase. But deep down, I felt it, the slow, steady leak of respect. One evening, he came home and said, "Let's do something spontaneous." I asked what he meant. "Let's go clubbing, with my friends." I hesitated. I hadn't been to a club in years. "You know I don't really like that scene," I said gently. He grinned. "Exactly. That's why you should come. You've gotten predictable." Predictable. It stung more than he probably intended, so I said yes. The night before, he showed me the outfit. He'd picked out a silk shirt, half-unbuttoned jeans, too tight for comfort. "What do you think?" he asked, spinning in front of the mirror. "It's a lot," I said honestly. He smirked. "That's the point." That's when I realized something painful. I wasn't the woman he wanted anymore. I was the mirror he was trying to break to feel young again. Still, I went. Because part of me wanted to believe the man who once looked at me like I was his piece still existed somewhere inside the noise. The club was everything I remembered hating. Lights flashing like panic attacks. Music so loud it made your bones vibrate. People pressed together in a sweaty blur. Evan's friends waved. When they saw him, pulled him into hugs, handed him drinks. None of them even looked at me. He disappeared into their circle almost immediately. I sat at the bar, ordered a drink, and watched him come alive in a world that felt foreign to me. He laughed too loud, danced too close, moved like someone who didn't have a fiancé waiting just a few feet away. Then I saw it, the moment that snapped something in me. A woman leaned in close to say something, her hand brushing his arm. He didn't pull away, didn't even flinch, just smiled. I walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said quietly, "Your drink's getting warm." He blinked, startled. "Relax, Lena. We're just talking." The woman stepped back, smirking. Evan turned away, already lost again in the beat. I went back to my seat and stared at my glass. I wasn't angry, not yet, just cold. It was like watching the last thread of something unravel in slow motion. A while later, he climbed onto the platform near the DJ booth, cheering, waving his drink, acting like a teenager at his first concert. His friends shouted his name. I walked over, touched his arm gently. "Evan," I said, "you're getting out of hand." He turned, face flushed with adrenaline. "Oh my God, don't start." "I'm not starting anything," I said, steady. "But you're crossing a line." He stared at me with that look, defiant, almost amused. Then he laughed loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You're not my mother, Lena. You don't get to tell me what to do." The world around us seemed to freeze. His friends went silent. Even the DJ turned his head. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. Really looked at him and saw the truth I'd been avoiding. He didn't see me as his partner anymore, just someone in his way. So I nodded. "You're right," I said quietly. "I don't." Then I turned, walked toward the exit, and didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. I crossed the street to my car keys, trembling in my hand, but not from anger, from finality. By the time I started the engine, I knew something had ended. Not love, not yet, but the part of me that kept waiting for him to grow up, she was gone. And I didn't know it then, but that would be the last night I ever waited for Evan to come home. When I got home that night, the silence felt heavier than usual. The apartment was spotless, dimly lit, and so painfully calm that every sound, the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, felt like an accusation. His shoes were by the door, the pair I'd bought him for his birthday. I stared at them for a long time before I finally exhaled. I wasn't shaking, I wasn't even crying, I just started moving. I pulled out boxes from the closet and began packing his things. Not like someone in a rage, but like someone cleaning up after a storm that had already passed. The loud kind of heartbreak had burned itself out weeks ago. What was left was quiet, methodical. I folded his shirts neatly, even the ones I hated, the ones that smelled like cigarettes and cologne. His sketchbooks, his camera, the random gadgets he never used but refused to throw away, they all went into boxes. When I reached our bedroom, I stopped at the dresser. On top was the small framed photo from our trip to the coast the day he proposed. We looked so young in it. I was squinting against the sun, his arm around me, both of us laughing. I ran a thumb across the glass, then placed it gently face down. In the top drawer was the ring box. I took it out, opened it for the first time since that night, and placed it on the counter beside a notepad. I didn't even have to think about what to write. You're right, I'm not your mother, but I'm also not your safety net. No anger, no bitterness, just truth. By the time I finished, it was almost dawn. I stacked the boxes by the door, took one last look around, and went to bed. I woke up to the sound of the lock turning. 5:10 a.m. He still had his key. The door creaked open, followed by the uneven rhythm of his steps. Heels clacked, then stumbled. He muttered something under his breath. Probably my name. Then went silent. A pause, a gasp. He'd seen the boxes. Then the sound of paper crinkling. He'd found the note. Are you kidding me? His voice cracked through the stillness. Lena, what is this? I didn't answer. He moved closer, each step heavier than the last, until he appeared in the bedroom doorway. Hair, messy eyes, bloodshot, still in the same clothes from last night. You really think this fixes anything, he snapped. You can't just pack my stuff like you're kicking out a roommate. I sat up slowly. You should get some sleep. I'm not drunk, he said defensively, even though his words slurred. You're overreacting. It was just a joke. Everyone flirts when they're out. It's harmless. I stared at him. Then maybe you should find someone who thinks it's harmless. For a moment he looked confused, as if the words didn't make sense. Then his jaw tightened. So that's it. You're ending this because of one sentence. I took a deep breath. I'm ending it because of what that sentence meant. He shook his head, pacing. You're being dramatic. You always do this, take everything too seriously. That line, you always do this, was his favorite escape hatch. Every time he messed up, he made me feel like the problem was how much I cared. Evan, I said quietly. Do you even hear yourself anymore? He stopped pacing, eyes darting between the boxes and the note. You can't just throw this away. We were supposed to get married. We were supposed to respect each other, I said. You stopped first. For a second, he looked like he wanted to cry, but instead he laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. You'll regret this, he said finally, voice brittle. Maybe I whispered, but not tonight. He stared at me one last time, the defiance in his eyes starting to crumble, then turned and left. The door slammed behind him, echoing through the apartment. And just like that, it was quiet again. But this time the silence didn't hurt. I lay back in bed, staring at the ceiling until the morning light began to creep through the blinds. For the first time in years, the air felt clean, like the dust had finally settled. Outside, a new day was starting. Inside, something else was finally ending. 2 weeks later, Evan was everywhere. Not in person, he wouldn't dare show up, but online. Every time I opened my phone there, he was smiling into the camera, drink in hand, surrounded by new faces that blurred together under neon lights. His captions were all the same flavor of defiance. New beginnings. Freedom looks good on me. No hard feelings, just lessons. Each post got hundreds of likes within hours. People cheered him on, congratulated. You deserve better, bro. I didn't reply. I didn't delete him either. Watching from a distance was strangely educational. It taught me how people rewrite history when they need to feel innocent. Then one night, a clip started circulating. Someone had filmed it at that same club. The music was deafening, but his voice cut right through it. You're not my mother. Lena, you don't get to control me. He was standing on a table, laughing as people around him whooped and recorded. I watched the clip twice, then locked my phone. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel embarrassed. I just sat there in the dark, realizing something important. He wasn't trying to forget me. He was trying to convince everyone else that he already had. The internet is cruel in its consistency. It loves a downfall as much as it loves a glow up. With it, people joked about his therapy through TikTok. Memes appeared mocking his speech, twisting his quotes. Someone even captioned his viral clip, "When your mom says no more allowance." A few days later, he texted me, "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, for the first time since the breakup, I typed back. "About what?" He replied instantly. "Everything. I miss you." I didn't mean what I said. I didn't respond. He kept trying texts, voicemails, long messages that swung between apologies and accusations. "You made me better. You broke me. You never even tried to understand me." Every time I read one, I felt less attached. His words no longer hurt, they sounded like echoes from a life that no longer fit me. Then, one afternoon, I was at a cafe, laptop open, headphones in, when a notification flashed: Evan Martinez has deleted his Instagram account. I didn't celebrate. I just closed my laptop, ordered another coffee, and let the quiet sink in. Maybe for him, the silence was punishment. For me, it was peace. That night, I journaled a single sentence. Some people need to lose their audience to finally hear themselves. And when I put the pen down, I realized I hadn't thought about him in hours. That was the first small victory. 6 months passed before I saw him again. By then, my life had softened in all the places he'd once made sharp. Mornings started with silence and sunlight instead of arguments. I'd learned to cook for one laugh alone and sleep through the night without waiting for a key to turn in the lock. Healing, I discovered, doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like folding laundry without crying over the extra space in the drawer. Then one evening I got an email. No subject line, just his name. "I owe you an apology. Can we meet?" I hesitated for 2 days before replying. Not because I wanted closure, I'd already found it, but because I wanted to see who he'd become. We met at the same cafe where I used to wait for him after work, the one with chipped tables and burnt coffee. I arrived early, sat near the window, and almost didn't recognize him when he walked in. Evan looked smaller, not physically, but in presence. His confidence had deflated into something quieter, almost humble. He smiled, tentative, like a man entering a memory he no longer owned. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," I answered. For a moment, we just stared. The silence between us wasn't tense anymore, it was just space. He finally exhaled. "You look good." "So do you," I lied politely. He laughed under his breath. "You don't have to be nice." We both smiled, and for the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the boy I used to love, the one before the pride, before the noise. He looked down, twisting the coffee cup in his hands. "I messed up. I know that. I've been in therapy. I've had time to think." I nodded but didn't interrupt. "I didn't understand what respect meant back then," he continued. "I thought love was just about passion. But I was wrong. You were trying to build something stable, and I was too busy chasing something loud." His voice trembled on that last word. I watched him for a while, then asked, "So why tell me now?" He met my eyes. "Because every time something good happens, I still think about how I ruined the one person who actually cared about me." The words should have made me feel vindicated, but instead they just made me tired. I took a sip of coffee, then said quietly, "I cared, yes. But that doesn't mean I was supposed to save you." He swallowed hard, nodding. "Do you ever think about us?" I smiled faintly. "I used to, but not anymore." He looked down again. That simple answer hit him harder than any insult ever could, because it wasn't anger, it was absence. We talked for a few more minutes, small things, safe things. When he finally stood to leave, he said, "I'm really glad you're happy." "I am," I said, and it was true. He paused by the door as if wanting to say more, then decided against it. The bell above the cafe door jingled softly as he walked out. I watched him cross the street, disappearing into the crowd. No drama, no tears, just a man fading from a story that no longer belonged to him. And as I finished my coffee, I realized something: forgiveness isn't about giving someone peace. It's about reclaiming your own. That night I wrote in my journal again, "Some ghosts don't haunt you. They just wait for you to notice you've outgrown them." And I slept better than I had in months. A year later, I walked down the aisle, not toward a dream, but toward a choice. The chapel was small sunlight spilling through stained glass, painting the floor in soft colors. There were no grand gestures, no orchestra, no drama. Just a quiet hum of warmth, the kind that feels like home instead of fireworks. The man waiting for me wasn't perfect, but he was steady. When I laughed, he listened. When I cried, he stayed. With him, love didn't feel like walking on glass or waiting for the next apology. It just felt simple. Halfway down the aisle, I caught a glimpse of something or someone in the back row. Evan. He wasn't dressed for a wedding, just a plain shirt, sleeves rolled up to hands in his pockets. He looked older, tired, softer somehow. For a moment, our eyes met, and time folded in on itself all those sleepless nights, the tears, the silence compressed into one quiet second. He didn't smile, he didn't wave, he just nodded. A small, almost invisible gesture. I held his gaze for one breath, then turned back toward the man waiting for me. The ceremony blurred by vows, laughter, applause. When it ended, I stepped outside into the golden light, still half in a daze, and there he was, leaning against the old oak by the church gate. For a second, neither of us moved. "You came," I said finally. He shrugged, didn't plan to, just wanted to see. I smiled, not unkindly. "And what did you see?" He hesitated, someone who really moved on. I looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, "A long time ago." He nodded, jaw-tight, eyes glistening, not from tears, just regret. The kind that sits quietly and doesn't ask to be forgiven anymore. "I'm happy for you," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I know," I replied, "and I hope you're happy too someday." For a second, he seemed like he might say something else, but then he just smiled, faintly, shoved his hands back into his pockets, and turned away. I watched him walk down the empty road until he disappeared around the corner. Then I turned back toward the laughter spilling from the church, my friends, my husband, my new beginning. As I stepped inside, a strange calm washed over me. The past wasn't chasing me anymore. It had simply stopped trying. In the end, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need justice. Peace was loud enough. And as I took my husband's hand and joined the celebration, one final thought crossed my mind, a quiet epilogue to everything we'd been. You don't always have to destroy someone to win. Sometimes living well